Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Data Room. Today, we have a very special guest. This is Simone May. I first met her as a guest speaker in my Founder's Journey class, and she was the co-founder and CTO of a startup called Clutch, and now she's currently working at the Lilly office at Rice University. So, Simone, why don't you tell the viewers a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, hi. It's nice to meet you, and I'm glad to be speaking with you, Jacob. Nice to meet you all, I should say, whoever's listening. I'm Simone, and I am currently a program manager at Lilly Labs under Rice University's School of Business, the Jones School of Business. It's a lot of words there. But I also founded a company called Clutch 3 or 4 years ago, and that journey was amazing and difficult all at the same time. And so I'm glad to be here and happy to talk about all the ins and outs of what that looks like and what that means.
Awesome. Thanks again for being here. My first question is just why did you agree to come on the podcast?
Well, anything I can do to support a Rice student, that's one of my priorities. So support you. And then second to that, I love talking about my journey. I think anything I can say or do to like help other people who are considering going down that path, I'm happy to. I wish I had dug in more before I started. What is Clutch today? It wasn't Clutch when we first started it. And so, anything I can do to help. I mean, I'm happy to talk about that.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I'm really, really glad you're here. I know that in the class we kind of already talked a little bit about your story, but maybe just at a high level, tell the viewers a little bit about your journey from undergrad to Accenture to Clutch and now to
Yeah.
Lilly.
Yeah, so I actually went to Purdue University, where I decided to study computer science. And that decision was influenced by both my parents, who are engineers by trade. And I knew that I really liked math and science. So I also just loved fiddling with technology, even from a young age. So I knew there was a path forward for me there. But when I started in computer science, I actually realized how much I didn't like it, but I knew it was going to open doors for me in the long run. So I stuck it out. I struggled my way through Purdue and joined, the National Society of Black Engineers. I became a member of this sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And so those experiences allowed me to realize how much I enjoyed the bridge between technology and working with people. So, and through those leadership positions, I also learned that I really enjoy leadership roles and management. Um, After Purdue, I went on to work for Accenture as a technology consultant. And through that experience, I actually was able to start, or I didn't come up with actually the idea. Well, sorry, let me backtrack. I was at Accenture. We had a business use case, like workshop, and we were all brainstorming how we could make a stadium, um, like a in stadium experience, like more interesting. And one of the solutions that we came up with as a team was this like in stadium concession delivery moment. Like you could order food to your seat during a game without having to get up and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, this could be like a real world application. Like, does this exist? And so I called up my then friend at the time, Madison, and basically was like, because I knew she was interested in being an entrepreneur, and I had never really had an entrepreneurial experience. And so I, called her up and we just started like jotting all of our ideas and spitballing everything on a Google Doc. And that developed into what is Clutch today. I'm sure you're going to ask more detailed questions about that, but that's the overview.
Awesome, awesome. And you said that, you kind of reached out to your friend. Like, what was it about your friend that kind of like drew you to want to reach out to her as like the person to help you with this idea?
That's a great question. I think so. At the time, like I knew that she had tried to start multiple business ventures, and I knew that she had an entrepreneurial spirit and also the background with her family being in entrepreneurship that yielded my confidence in like being able to work with her on this.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, I think, at least for me, I had never really had any sort of like desire to be a business owner or entrepreneur. I knew I always wanted to be in leadership, but I didn't really know if like how I was going to get there. And when I called her with the idea, I just knew that she would have the tools and resources and experience to sort of operationalize what the platform could be. And so at the time, I didn't really give it much consideration outside of that. I think I would say one of my strengths is as a leader is maximizing resources and strategically aligning yourself to people that can fulfill like a need on both sides, whether that's in business or in the corporate space. I don't do that with my personal relationships, even though that was a personal connection. Because I think, friendship should be fluid and genuine. But, I think that was where the that's why I had the idea of doing it, because I just knew she had had the experience that I lacked.
And I think, based on kind of what you told my class, like clearly you guys worked very well initially, but then kind of
Yeah.
started to have some differences of opinion along the way. What would be your advice to other people that are like thinking about, founding a company with someone else? Like, what are some good kind of co-founder hygiene habits that you would recommend?
That's a great question. And I honestly think this is something that people should talk about more. So first things first, I think you need to make sure that you guys are aligned on your values and like you truly like what truly brings you joy and sets your foundation as a person outside of a business. So you might be starting a business with someone, but like at the end of the day, ground level, like my personal priority is always going to be my family, my friends, and just like my like space, because in order to feel creative, I have to have those things in my life as a consistency. So an example of that is like I'm getting married. My priority is now going to be making sure that I am providing some level of stability to my partner in this journey, because getting married requires a lot of like a lot more of your emotional energy, a lot more of your energy to in planning and things like that. So I think that's the first thing. Like, what is your moral compass? What do you believe in? And another thing for me is like loyalty. Like I'm big on like loyalty, and like, you know, even if like sometimes not everyone agrees with, somebody you might be friends with or whatever, thinks they're this, that, and the third. If like you are my friend, I'm going to put that over anything else unless you start treating me poorly. So I think like, and that's just me, right? Like in general, I'm using those as an example of like, make sure you have those conversations with your whoever you start a company with, if you do, because those things will start to come to fruition if things in the company aren't going well. And that's the second thing. Make sure that you're always talking about, okay, well, what if the company's not doing well? How do you want to proceed? What do you want to react with? Like
Mhm.
make sure you guys have like a partnership agreement in place. Like, like life happens. So if something happens to your family, or like if you get, have kids or whatever the case may be, make sure that you guys have some sort of agreement that lines out like, hey, if this happens, I need this person to take on more responsibility, or we need to do this with the company finances, or like whatever the case may be. You should definitely make sure you have a partnership agreement in place before proceeding with anything officially as a business. That's one thing I regret and wish we would have done.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially kind of aligning your personal life. Like, yeah, they are a business partner, but I mean, if it's your startup, you're probably going to be spending almost all your waking hours on that anyways. And I think if you
Mm-hmm.
start it with a friend, yeah, you're at least a little bit more aligned on those aspects, I would say, probably for the most part, just because you naturally kind of found your way to that person. I guess kind of my follow-up question to that then is, entrepreneurs are probably very stubborn people for the most part. They
Yeah.
always want to kind of break through walls and make things happen. Like, how did you know that, it was just time to kind of like give it up and time to let it go?
Time to let Clutch go.
Yeah, time to let Clutch go and time to kind of part ways with your co-founder.
Yeah, that is a great question. I'm trying to find a way to answer it so I don't get sued. um, uh, before anything went down, I had already started to feel in my heart that I just wasn't connected to what we were working on anymore. So the way things went down, it would seem as though to an outside party who was privy to what actually happened that I didn't necessarily fully have a choice. I'll just leave it like that. But prior to that happening, I had already started to feel myself slip away. And it was mostly just because of the emotional toll it was taking on me in my life. Like I was stressed all the time. Life at that time was a complete blur. I wasn't even thinking about my wedding. I couldn't put my energy towards really anything. And I think that says a lot. And sometimes burnout happens even when you don't even realize it because you're so high functioning. And I think that happens to a lot of founders. Like a lot of founders experience this moment where like they don't even realize they're burning out, but like it just happens. So I would say I was definitely experiencing burnout. Um, the company wasn't doing so hot at the time, and it just everything was kind of coming to a head. So I knew that I wasn't connected to it anymore, and ultimately I did not necessarily want to fight to stay there.
Right.
um,
That makes
in
sense.
the
I think,
end.
whenever you have momentum, I think it's a lot easier to stay there and you want to
I
keep like
agree.
expanding on this vision. But if it's
Yeah.
kind of stalling out, it can be a lot more difficult. And then you maybe start thinking about what are some other ideas that I'm more interested in pursuing and things
Yeah.
like that.
And the other thing is, I think a lot of people miss the fact that sometimes businesses have a lull period, just like your life has a lull
Mhm.
period. It's okay for your business to like not be what it was when you first started. It's okay to not have to keep up with all the people that you had on your payroll or like all the products you might have been managing. Like sometimes your business needs to take a step back to gain momentum again. Like I think that's what happened with Apple, right? Like it was failing, and then they were like, oh, Steve Jobs, come back because like we don't know what to do, and then it all of a sudden like had an uptick, and
Mhm.
now it's obviously one of the most popular and like well-known brands out there. But at the end of the day, they had a low period too, and I think it's okay for those things to happen. It's okay for your business to take a step back to your personal life and vice versa.
Right. I mean, I'm sure along your time at Clutch, like there were not every moment was just like positive, positive, and then downhill, right? There were sort of like
Yeah,
hills and valleys along the way. So
absolutely.
what kind of advice would you have to kind of avoid burnout for as long as you did and to like overcome those lull states and like stay committed, stay focused on your business?
I would say make sure you have something in your life that is a consistent, make sure you have consistency elsewhere. So because that I call it like the sine wave of like business, like it's always going to be up and down, it's extreme. So make sure you have like a constant in your life, whether that's your hobbies, like maybe you like to work out, maybe you have a creative outlet, maybe I don't know what it is, but like make sure you have something that feeds your soul on a consistent basis, so that way you're not like just drowning when it's bad and like high when it's good, because you need
Hmm.
something that's going to like keep you grounded. And then I think the second thing is whatever relationships you have in your life, you do not have room for like drama, you don't have room for toxicity. So if there are people in your life that are not serving you and are not supporting you in a way that you need, then unfortunately you might just need to take space from them. I think one of the things I learned having a business is that you don't always necessarily need to like cut people off. Like I think there's this whole generational thing of like, let them go if they're not like supporting you and da, da, da. Like, no, sometimes just you need to take space from the people in your life that aren't in a place that where they can support you. And that happens. So I think for me, like my fiance was so Adam, so, so, so supportive. He was a constant in my life when we were running Clutch. Like without him, I don't think I would have nearly been as like grounded or like level headed at times, or I have like I work out 4 times a week, stuff like that.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I know what you mean. Like even though I'm not at that point where I'm just like working on a startup and
Yeah.
but like I think for me that the stability is rice. Like it has, the
Right.
surgery, 3 meals a
That's
day every
amazing.
time. It's just always there.
Yeah.
The classes, they're always gonna happen. And that gives you
Mhm.
kind of like a baseline to go out and do things like go to the gym or like try to raise a student-led venture fund or like have a podcast or
Yeah.
whatever it may be. I definitely can relate to that one quite a bit.
That's
Um,
awesome. And then
yeah.
Rice is so supportive of you all in that way, especially Lily. Like I love how like you guys had that opportunity because I definitely didn't at Purdue. Like this, it's amazing. You have no idea how much farther ahead you're gonna be when you start your company. Like you're gonna be so much farther ahead than you even realize.
Yeah, I'm definitely grateful for Rice and Lily. I couldn't ask for a better situation to be in, except for the fact that they don't have a student venture fund. But I'm working on
Maybe
that
one of
right
these
now.
days.
I'm working on that right now. But you know, a question I really wanted to ask you, I think this is like something I'd love to hear from founders is, of course, like you kind of go from this like idea phase to like now it's real. What were kind of the catalysts that helped you go through that process? And like, when did you know, like, this is real, this is what I want to do, I'm gonna jump into the deep end?
I think when just like shit just got more real. Like I don't even know how to describe it. Like we went from just like a Google Doc to hiring developers through this like independent research program at UC Davis to um someone willing to put in funding for us to have interns over the summer to keep developing on the idea to now trying to sell and pitch the idea to getting into an accelerator. Like I don't think there's necessarily one thing that happened that I'm like, oh yeah, this is how I know. I think it was just a culmination of things, like a snowball, if you will, that led to the decision where I was like, okay, I feel comfortable leaving my full-time job for this. I didn't leave my full-time job until we had secured funding and we had like a real business plan, like to launch and potentially like real customers, which we didn't even have for a long time. Like we did everything very backwards, which again, huge learning lesson. I think like anytime you start a business, it's ideal to like do your customer discovery before you even have a product. But we were young, we didn't know any better. We were just excited about what we were doing. So now that I know that, whenever I start my next company, I'll make sure to do it the right way. But there's no real one way to know. I think in general, I err on the side of caution. So whenever you do decide to kickstart that moment, make sure that you have again that stability in your life that yields you to be more productive in a space that's very unstable. 90% of startups fail. Like failure is going to be a part of the journey. And so you need to make sure that you have the mental capacity and the like physical space capacity to fail, because if you don't, it'll just make it that much harder to keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think that all makes a lot of sense. I'm sure like you're kind of just like in it. There's not even necessarily a moment, but it's like little steps here and there. It becomes like more and more real each and every day.
Mhm.
What was it like? Like talk to me about kind of the discipline and perseverance that it took, like full-time job and building a startup on the side.
Yeah. That was so at the time COVID was at its peak and everybody was working from home. And I had pretty much found a good rhythm with my job at Accenture. Like I had pretty much kind of nailed down a formula for my day-to-day basis, like work. So I had split my time towards the end of the day, like doing, iteratively working on Clutch while also working for Accenture. And I think again, that remote work aspect really did help. If you're not working remotely, I think time management is really important. So like don't procrastinate on deliverables. Make sure that you're constantly in communication with whoever your boss or manager is, because you don't want them to realize that you're starting to pull away. um and also make sure that like the if you are able to separate yourself from your like official job, make sure you've developed a system around that job, that maybe you're not necessarily gunning for a promotion that year, like maybe you're just okay with where you're at so you can work on this other venture. um
Mhm. I see.
I know everyone's job is different, but Definitely. And don't kill yourself trying to start a company. Like I think I really like to shy away from this idea of like, oh, like grind, like sleep 3 hours a night, like work at night from like 7 to 10 on your business. Like that's not fucking realistic. You have to be a human being before you can do something. Now, will there be times where you will be up late and you will be working on things like maybe later in the evening, or you get up at 1 a.m. because there's a production issue for the first time? Sure. But that should not be like really what's happening. You need to develop a system around anything that you do so that way you can be efficient and give yourself grace so that way you can like show up fully. Because if you're not showing up fully for anything, or especially owning a business, you're gonna burn out way sooner than you should.
Yeah, I think sleep is a pretty important thing that you mentioned in there. I mean, I think a lot of
Huge.
students among Rice like really don't get enough sleep, and especially for me, I notice like when I'm running on way less sleep, it just like my output is just worse across the board and it's harder to focus.
Yep.
So it's almost about finding like the right amount of sleep so that your day is more productive,
Yep.
but also not necessarily sleeping, 12 hours a day. Like you still do need to
No.
get that work done.
Yeah,
But
make
kind
sure
of
you're getting enough sleep though, for sure. It's huge.
Yeah, so on the idea of sleep, and you mentioned the gym earlier, like what are some habits that you would recommend to other people that have helped make you as successful as you've been?
Oh, thank you. I don't know. I'm such a oddly like routine oriented person. I feel like my if you're not naturally like that, I wouldn't suggest you like do that. I guess um the big thing is carving out time to release like serotonin in your day every single day, whether that's going on a walk, whether that's working out, whether that's like drawing, and be consistent with it, whether that's journaling. That's the first big thing. Therapy. I go to therapy very regularly, at least once to twice a month. That's huge because you need to make sure that you're like really making sure that you're self-aware and that you're being honest with yourself about where you are and your emotions, and like having somebody to like do that with is super super important. Put an energy and time towards your relationships that mean the most, because and make sure that you're surrounding yourself with people that hold you accountable and are not that are smarter than you.
Mhm.
I'm not friends with people that I don't believe are smarter than me or more well-rounded than me, or um you know more physically fit, whatever. All of my friends, all of my girlfriends, extremely successful and smart women, and I love that about them because it makes me want to do better. It makes me want to be better. So and that might be subjective based on who you're talking to, but I'm a better person because of the people I surround myself with.
Yeah, I always say like the five people you spend the most time with is a reflection of you, and that's like the advice I gave my
True.
sister before college, and I think that's honestly probably the reason I went to Rice is just because in high school I was very conscious to surround myself with the right people. I that is like
Mm-hmm.
my all-time favorite piece of advice. I think it's so critical, and I come from a tennis background, and
Oh,
it's in a
nice.
similar way of where you're saying like be in the room with people smarter than you. It's like in tennis, you always say like you want to play with people better than you. It's just like it
Yep.
makes you better. And even if like you might be if you're like the computer science major in the friend group, like maybe you're better at math or coding, but they might be
Yep.
more knowledgeable about business or what's going on in the markets or like
Absolutely.
whatever it may be. So you can always I think especially at Rice, like almost every student has something that they're really good at
That they bring to
and
the
that you
table.
can
Yeah.
Exactly. You can kind of, if you can find what they bring to the table, even if they're not necessarily aligned with you, like they don't have
Hmm.
a similar career goal, like you can still get something from them. And I guess also, like, I'm not trying to say that your relationships are so transactional like that. Like, it's not
No,
really
of course
about
not.
like just extracting the most that you can from your friends, but I think it's definitely something that can be appreciated.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's and I want to emphasize the transactional piece too. Like I'm not like going around looking for friends that like, okay, you do this job. Yeah, I want to be friends with you. You know what I mean? Like it's more so just like the attitude and the mentality around your friends, I think. Like the ones who are like know when to push and know when to like support. Like that push and pull and like that, it's so amazing because when your friends know when you're like burnt out, your friends know when you're like overly stressed, or they know when you're like, okay, Simone, you can be, you know what you're capable of. You can do more. You're not going to be stuck in this one place forever. Like, I think that has been critical for me in the past few months, just like having those friends that just know how to support you and also like have enough going on for themselves to feel happiness for you.
Hmm.
And then even like your family, if you are close with your family, same thing. Like my family is just, we're really close and very supportive of each other.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's great advice. And I mean, on that note, are there any other pieces of advice? Like I know with Clutch, I'm sure you had investors, so you probably had some form of mentors, and I'm sure you've had
Yeah,
maybe
for
professors
sure.
or mentors along the way. Like what are some pieces of advice that have been really valuable for you?
Yeah, and honestly, I hate that I forgot to mention mentors and advisors. Like, excuse me, you know, I think everyone always talks about like, oh, you should have mentors and advisors, but nobody really tells you about how those relationships develop or like where they come from or how you cultivate them. And ironically, I think that they're very similar to friendships. It's just 9 times out of 10, those people usually have way more experience than you. So there's this kind of like big brother, big sister relationship you develop with people who just like have similar background or similar interests or just like really want to make sure that they see you succeed. Um, and so I think that's also an important component of uh anything that you do because you have to be open, you have to be willing to listen. You have to be like you have to approach everything as if you know nothing. And I know that sounds crazy, but I approach everything in my everyday life as if I know nothing. Even if I know more than the person who I'm talking to, potentially, right? You never know. So I think that would be my advice. And I know it sounds backwards, and I know like you're at Rice, you're a student here, and everyone's like very knowledge oriented. Like in order to be at Rice you have to be super smart. I'm sure you have to have like whatever 3.5 3.6, but the point is like in real life you do not know everything, and that's okay. So like make sure that whenever you start something new, you're there for a reason. You clearly have something that you can bring to the table, but approach it as if you know nothing. Treat it as a like totally new science experiment where you're just like down to like absorb everything in the moment because you never know what kind of perspective you're going to gain, even if you don't feel like it. And that's
Yeah.
my second. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say on that note, before we kind of go to your next piece of advice, I really appreciate this one. I think something that I've noticed is a little bit in myself, but also just in other people, like sometimes when you're in a conversation and you're talking about a specific piece of knowledge or a niche, like it almost becomes a competition of like who knows more. And it's kind of
Yeah.
just people like competing to say like the most interesting fact or something. But if you just like sit back and like listen to the other people engage in that competition, like
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to prove to anyone that you know more. You might as well just sit back and kind of watch and
And
learn as much
listen.
as you can.
Mm-hmm. The man or woman who listens the most tends to be the most approachable and probably has the best thing to say at the end of the conversation. So I learned that from my dad. My dad is a very quiet person, and he's just like he always has like his little zingers, but like
Yeah, yeah.
super quiet and always just observing and absorbing. And I'm like, I like actually actively practice listening. I'm not very like I'm not naturally good at it. I have to like actively practice it.
No worries. Is there any other like pieces of advice from mentors, maybe like investors, like whenever they invested money, where they're like,
Yeah,
now that I've given you this money, like I really want to see you
tactful.
do this and that.
Yeah, for sure. So investors and mentors, they're always gonna like, I think so with investors, it's all about like the bottom line. Like we put in a certain amount of money, we're expecting to get a certain amount of money back. Like they're gonna come in where you might need help the most. So whether that's in sales or marketing, right? Like why are you focusing on spending money building a product and you don't even have this many people interested in it? Like one of the things that we did, or the reasons we were able to raise money from the beginning, is we had like a wait list of like 3,000 people interested in using our product across the nation, which is a huge signal, or not huge, but it's a good enough signal for somebody to be like, oh, there's interest there in the
Yeah.
thousands. And it wasn't that hard for us to get there. So I think like making sure you have good signals was one of the things we learned from the very beginning. Making sure you have good data around why your business is going to be worth investing, invest worthy. So that's definitely some tactical advice. I think my mentors have always just pushed me from an operations perspective to make sure that you have your I's dotted and your T's crossed. I think a lot of times people forget that structure is important, just as important as like good ideas. So make sure you guys have systems in place. Once you figure out what works, build a system around it to automate it so that way you can continue to work on the next thing. Because
Mhm.
otherwise you're going to get bogged down with like, and an example of that is if you're building a product, let's say you just like write out what you want the features to be on a Google Doc. Okay, fine. Somebody built it. But now you have 2 or 3 developers on your team and you don't know who's working on what. So now you might need a project management tool to help you manage the people working on those features. So that way not everybody's working on the same thing or nothing at the same time. So
Right.
like it's stuff like that that helps you continue to build on what you have. Make sure that you're always kind to people. Like that's less tactical advice, but it doesn't hurt to be kind. And even if people are unkind to you, make sure that you do your best to be kind, because you never know what bridge you might burn being disrespectful or unwilling to listen.
Yeah.
So,
That's
yeah.
that's fair advice. I watched this like show about the founder of Uber on
Mhm.
Netflix, and for him it was like every time he met anyone, it's all about the like power dynamic and like always pulling one over everyone else.
Mhm.
And I was thinking like, maybe that's what it's all about. Maybe that's what all the big founders are doing. But honestly, like when I just look at what do I think is like more ethical, I think it's just better to just be kind to people, like, and they'll appreciate it. Like, not people don't love getting one pulled over on them or like always having to negotiate every little thing. Like sometimes just being
Yep.
kind seems like the
Yeah.
best answer.
Yeah, and you have to do what works for you. Like maybe that worked for them, the Uber founder. Like
Travis
maybe that
Kalanick,
worked
yeah.
for them. But like if that doesn't work for you, then that's okay. Um, you know, and also do things that make you uncomfortable. That was going to be my last or second piece of advice.
Okay.
You might not like putting yourself out there, or you might like putting yourself out there, but you might not like being on a computer and setting up a Notion. Like do things that you don't like or that make you uncomfortable. It doesn't mean that you have to live there forever and do it forever, but it's important because that's what helps you grow as a founder. You can't be a one trick pony. You have to know how to do a lot of different things, whether that's talking to people and mingling, or that's getting on an AWS and looking at what the database has currently in production, how many users you have because your developers are all sick, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And actually, I have a great example of doing something that makes you uncomfortable. I work at a startup right now, and
Oh, which
the
one?
it's called Guzo. It used to be
Okay.
out of the Ion, and now we have like a new office in downtown.
Oh,
Um,
that's awesome.
But I've been there
Congratulations.
since January, and like at the start, we were kind of like building the product in Figma,
Mm-hmm.
and so like the CEO asked me to like do something in Figma, and like my immediate reaction was like, "Oh, I don't know anything about Figma." Like,
Right.
and then I said that, and immediately I was like, "Oh, I probably should just like figure it out." So then I kind of tried to
Mm-hmm.
figure it out, and I talked to the other people in the company that were actually like using the Figma day to day,
Mm-hmm.
and like I learned about it. And then in the summer, I messed around and like kind of built my own app. And now all of a sudden, like
See, look,
now I'm building the Guzo app like in Figma. So I've come like a
that's
long way,
amazing. You
just
see?
like putting yourself out there and trying to learn a new skill. And then once you feel a little more confident, then you kind of take it to a personal project. And once you've
Yep.
done a personal project, then you can do like a real world professional application of that idea.
Yep. Congratulations. That's an awesome story. That's amazing.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. So, one other question I really wanted to ask you is, I feel like you've come from Accenture and then a pretty like high volatility time in your life, and now you're back to Lilly. Like, how would you say you've changed the most over the past 5 years?
Oh my gosh. Um, how would I say I've changed the most? Um, I guess without being too long-winded, I think I have an appreciation for other people's stories a lot more than I used to. Just like learning more about people and where they come from and what makes them who they are. I think 5 years ago, somebody could be walking down the street, or I shouldn't even say that generally. I would be like on an airplane and somebody would try to talk to me. I'd be like, please don't talk to me. Like, I don't want to, no. But now I am really like a lot more open to interpersonal interaction and connection. And excuse me, a lot of that has to do with my journey because of that, that's a huge reason why we were so successful. And I also think that I don't beat myself up over shit anymore. I don't know if that's because of my age or just my experience, but like if I fuck up, I'm like, all right, whatever, move on. Like you cannot focus on all the things you did wrong or could have done right. It's
Mhm.
a waste of time. It's a waste of your energy, unless, of course, it affected somebody in a negative way. That would be the only reason where I'm like, okay, let me make sure I can figure out a way to make this better. If I hurt someone or made someone feel not good, I never want to walk away with that. That's one of my biggest things. People will always remember how you make them feel. So I definitely give myself a lot more grace though in other areas of just like, I'm not perfect. I'm not going to do everything right. And like, that's okay. You're going to fuck up and you're going to fail every day. And now I'm just like, whatever, move on.
Yeah, I think there's a really big difference between, kind of like looking back over what you did in a constructive way and saying like this is where I messed up, this is where I need to do better next time, versus just
Mhm.
like beating yourself up about it. And
Yeah.
that's something I learned from tennis. Like in tennis, you get to a point where like you've learned the technique, like you know how to hit a forehand. But
Yeah.
even if you know, you're still gonna miss at some points, right? And so it's so easy to just like beat yourself up, say like, why was my elbow in the wrong
Yeah.
spot or like my wrist or whatever. Like you can always like break it down to that, but
Hmm.
it's just like destructive the more you kind of harp on yourself, and it can cascade, and pretty soon you get destroyed in your match against a worse
Yeah, it's
opponent, right?
self-destructive. Yeah. And I like what you said too. Like, you're right. You should still look back on what you do and like take it as a lesson. I agree with that. But you can't, because then if you focus on it, then that's all you're thinking about. It's like you're not thinking about what can you do to move forward. Do you play tennis at Rice too? Like,
No, I actually
okay.
kind of I retired from tennis and now I play pickleball.
You
I'm the
retired.
IM champion for pickleball though.
Oh, I love pickleball. I played it like one time. It's pretty cool.
It's a lot of fun. But
Hmm.
now we're almost out of time, so I want to go to my last kind of two questions, and the first of those is, what is something you want to tell me?
Um, I think that you seem like you have very like good communication skills, and this seems like something that I hope works out for you, this podcast, I mean. um so yeah, that's what I want to say, and thank you
Awesome.
for including me in this.
Of course, I really appreciate it. It's the first year. It's almost been a year of trying to do this podcast, and it's been a lot of fun. Like I always wanted to have these conversations anyways, but I was like, why not put it in a podcast? Then I have an excuse to
Hey,
record it so I can always watch it back, and then maybe one day someone else will get some value from it too.
yeah.
And that brings us to the last question, which is, what is something you want to tell the viewers?
um Life is a windy road, and just go with it. Just go with it. That's what I want to share.
That was good. Some wise words. Well, Simone, I really enjoyed our conversation. I think I definitely learned a lot, and I'm gonna be excited watching this one back. I really appreciate your story. I think you brought a little bit different perspectives from some of the other founders that I've had
Yeah.
on. But it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.